Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them, and they should get what they want. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story, Tipping Point, standing up against unlawful tip sharing. The third story, how a stand for fair compensation led to corporate consequences. The third story, how the mass exodus of the mutinous crew put an end to the company. The first story is, try to force me to share tips? Management and the law says otherwise. I worked pizza delivery a few years ago. Now that I don't there anymore, I figured I'd share this gem. Me is me. Duh. Lead. My shift lead. PG. Phone girl. For a little while, some of the phone girls were jealous of how much money the drivers made in tips every night. We averaged about $90 to $150 on a good night, but their own tips usually ran about $20 to $30. One girl, PG, wanted drivers to share tips with the phone girls, even though they had their own tip pool that was split with the cooks. PG even tried to get the store manager to sign off on it. He wasn't having any of it, and ignored all the drivers when we told her just how much of our tips went to fuel and maintenance. PG wanted half of all driver tips to be split with the phone girls and cooks, despite having their own tip pool. Heck, the cooks were paid more than the rest of us, since they had the hardest job in the store. Seriously, they sometimes had to crank out up to 50 pizzas in 20 minutes on busier days. PG was a girl whose job was to answer a phone and take an order down on a computer that did half the work for her. While they were also supposed to make salads, that wasn't nearly as much as the cooks or drivers did. Hell, most of the time a driver ended up cleaning up the front end when the phone girls decided they weren't up to it. Finally had enough of it one day, so I told PG to her face that what she wanted to do violated state law. She still argued against it, so I decided to bide my time and wait. Here's the thing, I was well known for splitting any tips that I got that were over $20 with back of house, so I decided to wait until I got the local Rich Guy delivery. For the record, Rich Guy was well known for giving extravagant tips. I'm talking like $150 for a pair of 14-inch pizzas and some breadsticks, which ran about $50. The management hated it because they had to call him the next day each time and verify that yes, he meant to tip that much. And the kicker, Super Bowl Sunday was coming up, and I knew that big tips were coming. The best part was that he liked to ask for certain drivers, and I was one of the ones scheduled that he normally asked for. I talked with some of the other drivers who were scheduled that day to make sure that they were on board, and we set the plan in motion. We even had our shift lead in on it, which played into things later. Super Bowl was about a week after that discussion, between me and PG. Rich Guy ordered and I got the order, and boy did he pay out that day. He'd been having a party, and he ordered almost $300 worth of 18-inch pizzas, breadsticks, chicken bites, and wings. When I got there, he gave me $200 in a single tip, which doubled my tips for the night. At the end of the night, I counted up my tips and started to do my usual. But I stopped at the end when I was reporting tips on my end of night. Most of the staff were waiting for me to finish since I was known for sharing large tips, even the other drivers who knew what was coming. Calling my lead over to the register that I was reporting my final counts on, we had a discussion that we knew PG was listening in on. Me. Rich Guy gave me $200 for a tip. We going through the usual routine? Lead. Yeah, I'll leave a note to call him in the morning to verify again. Me. Great, thanks. Lead. You doing the usual thing? Referring my habit of sharing tips over $20. Me. Nah, I'm kinda done with it. Lead. Huh? I thought you always shared tips over $20. Me. Yeah, but I got sick of certain people who keep talking about forcing us drivers to share our tips. Lead. Oh, I see. Yeah, that would get me irritated as well. But you are aware that they can't do that, right? Me. They seem determined to try, so I'm gonna start keeping all my tips to prove a point. Lead. Fair enough. It's your money. Even I can't force you to share it, and that's law. PG had been waiting in the corner of the store for me to finish my count and share my tips the whole time. From what one of the others told me afterwards, her face turned about the color of a tomato during this whole exchange. Finishing up my count and dropping my money, I got ready to leave. Some of the cooks were waiting by the back door, expecting me to share as usual when I just walked by them. Thinking I'd forgot about them, one of them asked in a not-so-subtle manner, "Dang, that was busy. Did you make good tips tonight?" "Yup," I replied. "Not doing your usual?" one asked. He knew he wasn't allowed to ask me directly to share tips, but he'd been one of the ones I usually split tips with. Nope, you can ask Lead about it if you want to, but I've stopped doing that for now. I had the next couple days off, so I wasn't there for most of the storm that followed. The cooks that I usually split with got curious and asked Lead about what had happened. And since I told him I didn't mind him telling, he told them the truth. That one of the phone girls had been getting under my nerves about sharing tips, which wasn't legal. He then asked why they thought it was strange that I wasn't sharing tips. When he was told that was my usual thing, he commented in a not-so-subtle way that it was very generous of him. Needless to say, the cooks, who'd been the beneficiaries of my generosity, weren't that amused that I stopped being so generous, and wanted to know why. PG soon started getting the cold shoulder from most of the other back-of-house staff, and she soon complained to the owner, who'd been unaware of my normal generosity, that she was getting bullied. After a call to come into work on my day off, I was asked what was going on by the owner, so I told him everything. The next Friday, everyone was scheduled for a mandatory meeting. Owner came in and explained that forcing an employee to share tips was a violation of state and federal law, and that if he ever heard of someone being pressured to split their tips again, he would be reporting it to the labor board and firing the person responsible. PG was ordered to apologize to the drivers she'd been bugging about splitting tips, and I worked my next few shifts as usual. PG never gave me trouble after that, and eventually I started sharing larger than normal tips again into the general tip pool. I ended up changing jobs about a year later, but I still look back at that job fondly. I loved working there, and would gladly go back if they ever asked me to work part-time again. On a more positive note, PG has really turned herself around, and is even going to be a store manager at a different location soon. We ended up burying the hatchet a few months after the whole thing. The actions of PG in this tale are abhorrent and wholly unjustified. In addition to being unethical, it's illegal to try to force drivers to give phone staff their hard-earned tips when there's a separate tip pool for them. Even after learning that this demand is unlawful, PG continues to insist on it, showing a troubling sense of entitlement and a flagrant disrespect for her coworkers' rights. In addition, PG's actions created a hostile work environment by dividing and straining the staff. It's admirable that the lead and other staff members spoke out against this behavior, and eventually made people aware of how illegal such acts are. Although it's encouraging to learn that PG eventually expressed regret and has since changed how she behaves, her initial misbehavior is still unacceptable. It's the responsibility of employees to make sure that all employees are aware of their rights and responsibilities, and to act quickly to prevent any attempts to violate those rights. PG and anyone else who might think about taking similar actions in the future should hopefully learn a lesson from this story. The second story is, I gave them options to retain me. They passed on all of them, and were shocked that their actions had consequences. About 8 years ago now, I started a job that I really enjoyed. After nearly 3 years of standard 3% raises and glowing reviews, I had a talk with my boss and boss's boss at the same time. I provided 4 options, 3 of which would result in retaining me as an employee. 1, give me a 30% raise, based on the fact that my job used to be the job of 2 people before I automated over 1 full job away, and took on additional responsibilities without an increase in pay. 2, promote me to manager of a department I was more than qualified to run, whose manager had recently retired, and then backfill me with someone junior. 3, allow me to work at the company doing a split of my normal duties and do company-owned research to support me getting my PhD. 4, I would seek work elsewhere. I was told that no one working only 45 to 50 hours per week deserved the amount of money I was looking for. My boss loved to refer to the invisible hand of Mr. Market, and was rejected for both the promotion and the PhD research funding. 1 month later, I asked for another meeting and included HR. At that meeting, I reviewed the notes of our last meeting, and for everyone to agree that's what had been discussed. I then handed them the offer letter showing that I had been offered the 30% raise and was capped at 40 hours per week without prior authorization, because the position I moved into had a mandatory overtime stipulation, even for exempt employees. We called it time and fries because it wasn't time and a half, but it was time plus an hourly premium. I told them I would not be entertaining any counteroffers, as their opportunity to retain me expired when they rejected me. The HR person asked me to reconsider, and I said I shouldn't have to go out and get a competing offer letter every time I want a decent raise. I should be compensated based on contribution and given raises based on merit. If I have to threaten to quit every time I want to be fairly compensated, I may as well just take the competitive offer and save myself the stress. Then I looked at my boss and said, I guess you were wrong about what Mr. Market thought about the value of my time, and asked if there were any questions before we concluded the meeting. After about 15 seconds of stunned silence, I left the room. My boss made no attempt to speak to me again until 2.5 weeks later, when he asked me what my transition plan was for my work. I told him I had been awaiting his transition plan for my work and had no intention of cramming weeks of work into my final 3 days. I sent an email to HR saying I wasn't feeling well and was sick my final 3 working days, then cashed out my vacation. Oh, and my final day was the first of the month, so hooray for a free month of insurance benefits. Bad managers really end up going full-on sour grapes when their best employees leave. Your strategy for raising concerns with your employer and advocating for fair pay is commendable. It's clear you considered your options and were ready to act based on their response. It's unfortunate that your employer didn't recognize your value and refused to meet your reasonable compensation and advancement requests. You show self-worth and determination by presenting evidence of competing offers and refusing to accept counteroffers. It's too bad your manager didn't recognize your contributions until it was too late. The fact that they addressed the situation after you left shows their leadership style and priorities. Your professionalism and dedication to your own health are shown by the fact that you left on your own terms and made sure that you could leave your job without too much stress or burden. Thanks for sharing your story. I hope you found better jobs where your work is valued and rewarded accordingly. The third story is Revolution in Hollywood Video. In the early 2000s, I worked for Hollywood Video. I was trying to get the assistant manager position for a while. Our store manager was moving a couple hours north to get married to his girlfriend and live together up there. Good dude. I went to his wedding. The deal was they'd leave me in charge for 2 weeks as a chance to prove myself, and then we'd have a new store manager. Except I had none of the authority. I couldn't hire people, I couldn't order stock, I couldn't even make the schedule. And 2 weeks turned into 3 months. Understandably, the store fell apart. I was a kid, without the ability to do even the things I knew how to do, and had to call our district manager about everything. The newest member of the staff was a girl a few years older than me. She'd been working there maybe a month or 2 prior to the store manager leaving. We'd carpooled together up to his wedding. She comes to me one day and says, "You're gonna quit when you hear this. They offered me the assistant manager position." "You're right I'm gonna quit." "Cool," she said. "I already did." Through just a random confluence of events, every employee was either scheduled that day or came in to rent a movie or pick up a paycheck or something. And I told them I was quitting, and they said they were quitting. We all came back that night, called the district manager. The call went like this. "Hey, DM found a new store manager yet?" Hemming and hawing. "Okay, you have 2 weeks, I quit. Hold on, someone else wants to talk to you." And I handed the phone over. About a half dozen of us quit that way, all on the same phone call. Anyhow, they fired our worst employee the next day, meaning I had to cover even more shifts than I already was, opening and closing every night. The regional manager called me and said I was a communist. If I recall correctly, he was later busted for embezzling. I told him we could have just locked the store and gone home. We fired back by asking our regulars to call in compliments. The comment line called us a week later and told us not to do that because we'd shot up to the highest rated store in the country in a matter of days. I think my response was, "Fire me." I don't even remember my last day, but they had a completely new staff 2 weeks later, and within a few months the entire company collapsed. Wow, sounds like things at Hollywood Video have been really crazy. The fact that you were put in such a tough spot without the right authority or support to run the store well is a shame. You and your coworkers did the right thing when you felt mistreated and alone by standing up for yourselves. You all made the decision to quit together, and the way you handled it's really impressive. Everyone quit on the same phone call. Shows a lot of strength to stand together and fight against unfair treatment at work. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.